Autzer-Terbes, Algeria, November 10, 1942. A German reconnaissance patrol, peering through the desert's shimmering heat, witnessed something that would fundamentally change its assessment of American military power. Small U.S. vehicles, once disregarded as simple transport, advanced on their location outfitted with heavy machine guns and protective plating. These were not the weaponless quarter-ton trucks detailed in Wehrmacht intelligence summaries. In a matter of hours, initial German field reports started documenting engagements with what the troops dubbed gun jeeps. This evolution had started not within U.S. engineering facilities, but from the urgent necessity of battle itself. When U.S. forces arrived in North Africa during Operation Torch on November 8, 1942, they possessed thousands of Willys MB and Ford GPW Jeeps. These machines were feats of engineering, created via a rigorous 1940 development initiative that had American Bantam, Willys, and Ford vying to produce the ideal light scouting vehicle. The Jeep that emerged could cross ground impassable to weightier vehicles, transport 5 troops or 800 pounds of freight, and function dependably in environments ranging from Arctic chill to desert warmth. What it lacked was combat capability. General George Patton, monitoring early American operations in North Africa, remarked that the Jeep was exceptionally helpful for scouting and liaison duties, but stayed exposed during fighting. That view mirrored conventional military thinking. Light vehicles handled supply and scouting tasks. Fighting was reserved for tanks, armored cars, and infantry. This doctrinal division was perfectly logical in peacetime strategy. It proved insufficient when American troops met German and Italian forces who had refined desert warfare for 3 years. The Africa Corps eliminated American scouting patrols with dismissive efficiency. F-Jeeps dispatched forward to find enemy placements could not defend themselves against minimal resistance. Crews either pulled back without information or were killed trying to complete their missions. The casualty count rose swiftly in the initial weeks of the North African campaign. Some scouting units took severe losses. The equation was straightforward and harsh. Unarmed vehicles were not survivable in active combat areas. An immediate change was essential. The answer materialized from pragmatic creativity. Maintenance crews started improvising upgrades using any materials they could find. A maintenance sergeant in the 1st Armored Division attached a Browning M2, 50 caliber machine gun to a reinforced pedestal. Another group fashioned steel plates to shield radiators and drivers from small arms fire. A third installed twin 30 caliber Brownings together, giving up the 50 calibers range for a higher rate of fire. These first alterations were rough, frequently jury-rigged from salvaged parts and scrap. They contravened official guidelines and appalled Ordnance Department officers who maintained that military hardware must adhere to standard designs. They also functioned. In a few weeks, American reconnaissance patrols were not just surviving but actively confronting enemy units. Jeeps that were once death traps transformed into effective combat platforms. The boost to American soldiers' morale was instantaneous. They were no longer defenseless when meeting enemy troops. They could retaliate. German forces observed this shift with consternation. Initial Wehrmacht intelligence summaries had portrayed American reconnaissance as cautious and easy to anticipate. By late December 1942, those summaries mentioned aggressive American patrolling with heavily armed light vehicles that initiated contact rather than just observing. The variety of modifications reflected their non-centralized origin. In contrast to German forces, whose weapons development proceeded from centralized planning via strict approval channels, American modifications appeared spontaneously, with numerous units addressing urgent tactical issues. The 2nd Armored Division preferred setups that prioritized firepower, installing the heaviest weapons the Jeeps could bear. The 3rd Infantry Division prioritized defense, attaching armor plating that traded some agility for crew protection. Airborne units devised stripped-down models that could be rapidly taken apart and put back together. Cavalry reconnaissance squadrons formulated tactics built on speed and movement, employing armed jeeps in synchronized teams. No single method was clearly best. Each represented distinct tactical needs and operational settings. By January 1943, the armed jeep trend had permeated American units in North Africa. German intelligence officers found it hard to classify what they were seeing. Existing vehicle identification systems lacked a designation for the armed jeep. It was too light for an armored car, too potently armed for a standard reconnaissance vehicle, and too aggressive to match established doctrines. Captured German papers from this time show clear bewilderment. S1 Abwehr Technical Intelligence Summary tried to classify American Jeep types by weapon setup, cataloging 17 separate versions. The author disappointedly concluded that American modifications had no standard pattern, rendering systematic classification futile. The official U.S. Army reaction to unsanctioned field upgrades was, predictably, procedural. Ordnance officers contended that non-standard vehicles made maintenance and supply more difficult. Safety inspectors fretted over liability. Supply officers griped about managing parts for non-standard setups. Every one of these worries was valid from a peacetime logistical standpoint. Every one was irrelevant when men were dying because their hardware was insufficient. The discussion concluded sharply in February 1943, when high-ranking combat commanders stepped in. General Ernest Harmon, leading the 1st Armored Division, directly overruled orders to take off the unapproved modifications. General Terry Allen of the 1st Infantry Division instructed his maintenance crews to speed up modification efforts. General Omar Bradley mandated that modified Jeeps get priority for replacement parts, irrespective of non-standard designs. The M31 pedestal mount, built for either 30 or 50 caliber machine guns, went into production in April 1943. Before the year ended, over 31,000 had been produced and sent to combat zones. The British had been altering Jeeps since getting their first Lend-Lease shipments in 1941, although their method varied from American practice. British Special Air Service, SAS missions in Egypt and Libya, employed Jeeps for deep strike raids on enemy airfields and supply points. SAS Jeeps carried twin Vickers-K machine guns taken from obsolete aircraft, weapons with a massive fire rate nearing 1,200 rounds per minute. These powerfully armed vehicles provided immense firepower in short, fierce encounters. A standard SAS raid involved Jeeps speeding between lines of parked aircraft, gunners firing sustained bursts that wrecked dozens of planes before the vehicles disappeared back into the desert. By November 1942, SAS missions had wrecked over 400 Axis aircraft on runways. American units observed British methods but tailored them for different tactical needs. British missions were precision strikes by special units after detailed planning. American armed Jeep missions were more improvisational, aggressive patrols that actively sought battle. This highlighted wider contrasts between forces fighting since 1939 with scarce resources and forces just arriving with apparently limitless materiel. American armed Jeeps were not special forces tools but standard gear in regular combat units. The vehicles were seen as expendable, simply replaced from huge production outputs. Where British missions stressed economy of force and meticulous planning, American missions stressed sustained, aggressive engagement and a readiness to incur material losses. The invasion of Sicily in July 1943 brought armed Jeeps to a landscape drastically unlike the North African deserts. Sicily's tight mountain roads, steep slopes, and fortified villages posed tactical problems that helped defenders. German troops established interlocking fields of fire that wrecked conventional assaults. Armed Jeeps were unexpectedly potent in this setting. Their compact size permitted travel on roads too restrictive for tanks. Their velocity allowed quick dashes between shielded locations. Their firepower could pin enemy defensive spots long enough for infantry to advance. S1 battle near San Fratello in August involved armed Jeeps pinning German machine gun spots that had trapped infantry, allowing a successful attack in minutes. The Italian mainland campaign, starting in September 1943, led to new alterations for specific needs. Mountain combat in the Apennines demanded vehicles that could function on steep ground with poor maneuverability. As the 4th Ranger Battalion devised a setup placing the 50 caliber machine gun on a high pedestal to fire over stone barriers. The 82nd Airborne Division perfected its glider transportable design, making a Jeep that broke into parts fitting a glider S cargo hatch and was reassembled in less than 10 minutes. The 1st Special Service Force fitted their Jeeps with both U.S. and captured German arms, acknowledging that deep missions might necessitate using found ammunition. German forces modified their tactics to defeat armed Jeeps, but saw little success. Anti-tank guns were placed to cover expected routes of approach. Ambushes were set at choke points where Jeeps had to slow down. As snipers aimed at Jeep crews, these counter-tactics had some effect but failed to resolve the Germans' core dilemma. They were fighting with scarce resources against foes with seemingly boundless equipment. As the United States produced more than 640,000 Jeeps during World War II, Germany manufactured roughly 50,000 Kübelwagens, their nearest equivalent, and these were inferior. The Kübelwagen did not have four-wheel drive, had less than half the Jeep's horsepower, and was not easily adaptable for heavy weapons. German troops desired captured American Jeeps, viewing them as some of the most prized spoils of war. Winter 1943 to spring 1944 found the Italian campaign mired in savage fighting for the Gustav Line, centered on Monte Cassino. The mountainous landscape, winter conditions, and entrenched German defenses created a hellscape for attackers, as standard vehicles floundered in snow and slush. Tanks were immobilized. Supply lorries could not get to forward units. Armed Jeeps kept running when other vehicles stalled. Their low weight and four-wheel drive permitted movement on roads that heavier vehicles could not use. They moved supplies forward, carried out wounded, offered fire support, and sustained communication between cutoff units. Commanders increasingly saw Jeeps not as niche reconnaissance assets, but as all-purpose platforms able to meet almost any battlefield need. Planning for Operation Overlord, the Normandy invasion, brought a renewed emphasis to Jeep alterations. Allied planners knew the Bocage landscape would pose distinct tactical difficulties. The Norman region was a patchwork of small fields separated by dense hedgerows on high earth banks, forming natural defensive lines that funneled attackers into kill zones. Scouting would be hard through the thick foliage. Tank movements would be heavily constrained. Infantry would engage in disjointed fights. Armed Jeeps presented possible answers. Their compact size permitted driving in tight lanes. Their speed allowed for quick movement and retreat. A new upgrade appeared just for Bocage combat. The hedgerow cutter, a vertical steel blade on the front bumper, made to sever enemy wires stretched across roads. This uncomplicated invention would save innumerable lives in France. D-Day, June 6, 1944, had Jeeps among the initial vehicles landing on Normandy's beaches. Many were outfitted with deep-water fording equipment, letting them be driven from landing craft into chest-high surf without swamping their engines. These vehicles started working instantly under fire, pulling anti-tank guns, evacuating casualties, hauling supplies, and engaging German defenses. The pandemonium of the landings highlighted the Jeep's main strength, adaptability. When purpose-built equipment broke down, Jeeps filled the void. They acted as ambulances when medical transports were hit. They moved ammunition when supply trucks were held up. They gave fire support when armored vehicles got stuck in the beach sand. The Bocage combat of June and July 1944 confirmed all of the planners' worries. Advances were measured in hundreds of yards and cost hundreds of lives. Tank movements were almost impossible as vehicles climbing hedgerow banks revealed their weak underside armor. Infantry moving across open fields were cut down by machine gun fire. Every hedgerow-lined field turned into a distinct fight. Armed Jeeps showed surprising effectiveness in this nightmarish landscape. Their tactics advanced quickly through experimentation. The usual method was a high-speed rush to a hedgerow, gunners firing over the top, while drivers made sharp turns to dodge German return fire. This mix of shock, firepower, and rapid retreat frequently pinned German positions long enough for infantry to move up. It was hazardous work with many vehicle casualties, but it was effective. By late July 1944, almost every American combat unit in France used armed jeeps as regular equipment. The upgrades were no longer field improvisations, but part of systematic materiel allocation. New jeeps came from supply depots already outfitted with machine gun mounts. Armor kits were handed out through standard supply routes. Ammunition for vehicle-mounted guns got the same priority as infantry rifle rounds. The shift from experimental fix to standard procedure was finished. German intelligence summaries from this time show their exasperation. One captured paper from 7th Army headquarters stated that American armed light vehicles were causing relentless security issues. Supply columns, communication wires, headquarters, and artillery units all faced possible attack from small bands of American vehicles that showed up without warning. The breakout from Normandy in early August, Operation Cobra, showed the armed jeeps' capability in fast-moving warfare. As German lines crumbled and Allied units sped across France, armed jeeps operated ahead of the main columns, checking routes, taking vital ground, and attacking retreating German units. The Falaise Pocket Battle featured jeeps setting up mobile blockades on German escape routes. Working in groups of 4 to 6 vehicles, they spread chaos among German columns trying to flee encirclement. A common fight involved jeeps striking from several directions at once before pulling back. They seldom annihilated large enemy units, but caused so much confusion that German units fell apart. The mental impact greatly surpassed the material damage. Operation Market Garden in September 1944, the daring Allied airborne mission in Holland, placed armed jeeps in their most striking role. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions landed jeeps by glider, setting them up in defensive roles within hours. These vehicles, carrying 50 caliber machine guns, turned into mobile strong points in frantic fighting against German counteroffensives. Their capacity to move quickly gave a flexibility that fixed positions did not have. When German assaults threatened one area, jeeps would focus fire at the vital spot, then swiftly move as the danger shifted. This agility was essential in protecting landing zones against German units that had more men and heavier arms. The Battle of the Bulge, Germany's final major offensive starting December 16, 1944, challenged American forces like never before. German units attained total surprise, pushing deep into American lines through the Ardennes in winter. Units were isolated, communication broke down, and commanders lost control of the situation. Armed jeeps became vital, performing numerous essential functions. They acted as communication links between cut-off units when radios went dead. They ran reconnaissance to find German positions. They functioned as quick reaction teams to handle enemy breakthroughs. They evacuated wounded when ambulances could not handle the snow-filled roads. In Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was encircled, armed jeeps were the only dependable way to communicate around the defensive line. German forces in the Bulge had gained immense respect for American jeeps. Captured vehicles were sent straight to division headquarters instead of being kept by the units that found them. In some recorded instances, German officers argued over captured jeeps while American units were counterattacking nearby. This rivalry showed how much German forces depended on enemy equipment to fill their own logistical gaps. The irony was clear to German soldiers, who saw American jeeps as better than any similar German vehicle. The last months of the war, January to May 1945, featured American forces pushing into Germany. Armed jeeps headed nearly every push, moving far ahead of main units to check routes, find German defenses, capture bridges before they were blown, and keep contact between fast-moving columns. Germany's Autobahn system offered perfect routes for jeep missions. Small groups could move 50 miles or more ahead, reporting on German units and taking key locations. The Germans, their army disintegrating under massive pressure, could neither follow these missions nor effectively stop them. The war in Europe concluded on May 8, 1945. The U.S. Army at once studied equipment performance to guide post-war planning. The official Army Equipment Board ran comprehensive interviews and checked after-action summaries. Their findings on armed jeeps were unambiguous. The alteration of quarter-ton trucks with machine gun armaments and protective armor was one of the war's most triumphant field adaptations. These vehicles delivered combat power far beyond their original design specs. Future light vehicle designs must integrate the lessons from wartime alterations. This endorsement marked a profound change in military philosophy. The conventional idea that specialized gear must be purpose-built in factories had yielded to the understanding that soldiers' battle experience creates solutions engineers might never imagine. Post-war study showed the initiative's scale. Tens of thousands of jeeps in European and Mediterranean theaters got combat upgrades during the war. Over 30,000 were fitted with official M31 machine gun mounts. Thousands more got armor plating, wire cutters, or other specialized gear. The financial benefit was significant. By altering existing vehicles instead of designing purpose-built combat cars, the Army saved huge procurement funds while getting better operational outcomes. The armed jeep embodied smart engineering, getting peak capability from minimal resources through adaptation, not costly new designs. German commanders, discussing the war in post-surrender talks, repeatedly named the American Jeep as among the most formidable Allied equipment. Its success came not from high-tech complexity, but from the American readiness to change equipment for real combat needs instead of theoretical rules. This adaptability showed a wider American method, prioritizing pragmatic outcomes over doctrinal rigidity, material plenitude over resource scarcity, and swift adaptation over inflexible planning. The legacy of armed jeep alterations continued long after World War II. Forces in the Korean War promptly armed their jeeps, using the European theater's experience. Vietnam featured armed jeeps in numerous roles, from convoy defense to forward air guidance. Post-war civilian jeep models inherited traits pioneered by wartime upgrades. The modern military vehicle, from the Humvee to the MRAP, traces its direct ancestry to lessons from jeep alterations. Most importantly, the armed jeep experience set a guideline that is still core to American military culture. That soldiers in battle have the clearest grasp of equipment needs, and that field creativity should be fostered, not stifled. The account of how American soldiers turned plain jeeps into exceptional combat machines merits recognition as one of World War II's most significant innovations. It was not brilliant scientists creating revolutionary technology in labs. It was practical soldiers fixing immediate issues with handy materials. Maintenance sergeants welding machine gun mounts in field depots, engineers making armor plates from salvaged steel. Thousands of mechanics and soldiers who identified problems and solved them without formal permission. Their shared resourcefulness produced a vehicle that German forces never foresaw and never successfully defeated. The armed jeep served as evidence that American adaptability and tactical versatility could conquer early disadvantages via relentless innovation. German troops started the conflict with better gear, instruction, and tactical principles. American troops surmounted these benefits not by emulating German methods, but by creating uniquely American answers. The armed jeep personified this method, taking a vehicle made for one job and adapting it for dozens of combat functions. This readiness to accept field creativity above bureaucratic uniformity, to rely on soldiers' assessments over engineers' requirements, grew into a key trait of American military competence. The armed jeep remains a lasting testament to the strength of pragmatic innovation and the sense in allowing soldiers to fix their own issues when provided the liberty and means to do it.